We got to chapter 12, and this is a pivotal point. We're halfway through chronologically reading, and chapter 12 is actually the midpoint. 12 to 15 is kind of the midpoint in the sense of midweek. That's when a lot of things change. We have two ministries going on. We have the two witnesses for 3.5 years, the beginning of the tribulation, so the first half. We have the two witnesses, their ministry. The theory is two witnesses ministry, and what comes of it is 144 sealed. So we can consider this like the sealing and the saving, or at least the sealing of the Jewish people, the 144,000 of Israel. We get to the midpoint, a lot of things happen, and then we have a separate ministry. I believe that it's the ministry of the 144,000, and it's not really a ministry of actively evangelizing, it is just surviving. It's the 144,000, and it's also the devil's ministry. This is when the kingdom gets established, or at least it gets revealed, powers get put in place, a lot of stuff happens during this time. And let's see. Okay, we got that put on there also. So we'll start, and we got a lot of ground to cover. I'm trying to cover 3 chapters, and then also most of the book of Daniel. But we'll probably just kind of glaze over that as best we can, but we'll kind of pick up or get the highlights on it. So we'll start off real quick with prayer, and then we'll read. We'll read chapter 12 and see where we can get out of that. Thank you, God, for today, and we pray for wisdom and understanding, God. If it's truth, let it come to the top, and if it's not incorrect, God, let it just be forgotten. And we thank you and praise you in the Son's name. Amen. Amen. All right, anybody like to start off reading chapter 12 of Revelation?
Sure. A great portent appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pangs, in agony of giving birth. Then another portent appeared in heaven, a great red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail swept down a third of the stars from heaven and threw them to the earth. Then the dragon stood before the woman who was about to bear child, so that he might devour her child as soon as it was born. As she gave birth to a son, a male child, who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was snatched away and taken to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness where she had a place prepared by God, so that there she could be nourished for 1,260 days. A war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back, but they were defeated, and they were no longer any place for them in heaven. The great dragon was thrown down, the ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven proclaiming, "Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our comrades has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. But they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. For they did not cling to life, even in the face of death. Rejoice then, you heavens, and those who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you with great wrath, because he knows that his time is short." So when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given to 2 wings of the great eagle, so that she could fly from the serpent into the wilderness, to her place where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time. Then from his mouth the serpent poured water like a river after the woman, to sweep her away with the flood. But the earth came to help of the woman. It has opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon has poured from his mouth. Then the dragon was angry with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her children, those who kept the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus.
So we went over this without looking at your notes. Does anybody remember what a dual prophecy is? Or did you already look at your notes? Okay, dual prophecy is when a prophecy gets fulfilled in part early, but then it gets fulfilled even further or with more completion later on. And we're going to run into a lot of this, or we're going to see something it's going to seem like, oh, it's recounting something. Oh, you can easily say, oh, that's recounting this, but then there's a change in it, so it's alluding to something in the past, but then it's something completely different. So we can consider that a dual prophecy in the sense of it's a repeat, but there's a fuller fulfillment. Now, this story, some people mistake it to be that it's the retelling of the Garden of Eden, and the dragon was in the garden, and this woman, that's Eve, who brings forth Israel. Israel eventually comes through, and this red dragon, Satan, is there, and she's going to devour the child. And people think, oh, well, this, oh, how fitting, like halfway through the book, we kind of have a flashback to the beginning, like, oh, where did it all start? It started back here. Well, we see that, but we read it, and then we see things change that don't line up with the creation account, or we're in the Genesis account, and then we see there's a change in it, so we can understand this as something different. So we can say, oh, it's alluding to something in the past, but it's something completely different. And we're going to see this a few times throughout chapters 12, 13, 14, 15, where history or a biblical story, it sounds like it's been fulfilled, or it sounds like that's what John's alluding to, but it's something different. So we can consider this a fulfillment, a fuller fulfillment, or a complete fulfillment of that prophecy, even though we can say, oh, it's been done in the past. And we've used examples of the virgin birth of one time, the prophet that gave it, when Isaiah said, unto you a child is born, or behold, this virgin or this young woman will conceive and give birth, and the government will be on his shoulders. He was actually talking about a specific person of his time. So he's just saying, in 10 months, this is going to be complete. What my words are going to be complete within 10 months. And then later on, when Christ came, they said, oh, that young woman, that meant virgin. So they said, oh, this virgin, the Virgin Mary, will produce the Christ, and the government will be on his shoulders. So that was a dual fulfillment. It got completed. Its prophecy was fulfilled at the time the prophet said it, but it was for fuller fulfillment in the future. So we're going to, I think I've noted that a few times in the notes of, this sounds like something familiar, but don't get it confused. The big thing, I think we talked about this earlier last week or the week before, about think of this like as a movie scene, and when they do when they have the little the checkerboard or the clicker or whatever, like action, and they have the scene written on it, and that's how to keep track of the movie when they're doing post-production, like what scenes are what. Things that pop up like images or objects or things that are happening around something. We said, like, oh, when there's a thunder, lightning, and hail all at once, we see that happening a few times. Like, those could either be separate events that happen following or starting something, or they're all the same thing. They overlap in some way. One thing I want to point out is the flood that's talking about here. To my understanding, this is not a recount of creation. This is not a recount of God creating and you'll crawl on your belly and you will strike his heel, but he will step on your head, kind of a thing. Because later on it talks about a flood, and if you're thinking about this as the Garden of Eden stuff, you're, oh, that's Moses' flood's talking about. So the devil made the flood to try to kill, defeat the promise of Israel. Moses, when Noah came about, when they looked upon him, he was so beautiful, they thought, this is the one that's going to save us from our sins. This is the one that's going to save. They were already looking for that Messiah way back in Genesis. And when they saw Moses, they said, he's so beautiful, we can't kill him. So that's why they put him in the basket, sent him down the Nile, and that was Moses. Noah, they called him Noah because they believed that he was going to save the people, and in a type of Christ's way, he did save the people. He built the ark, and it says that just like in the days of Noah, they were taken away. And it says about, was it in, I can't remember if it's in here or in Revelation, but they talk about that, when Christ in Matthew 24, when he was talking about, it's going to be like the days of Noah. Everybody was eating and drinking and being merry, and they said, all of a sudden the flood came and they took them away. They took Noah and his family away, and the rest were gone. And this kind of way or in a similar way, there's a flood that's sent, but it's not the flood of Noah's, because we believe that God sent the flood as judgment on the people. And in this, and in Revelation, when it talks about the flood, it says that the dragon spewed forth water to try to trap the child, or try to catch the woman. And it said the the earth opened up and drank the water that she could flee. So we understand this as not a recollection or not a recall of the past, but this is new events. And not just in Revelation, but when we look at the Old Testament, when it's talking about prophecy of the things to come, there's this emphasis on a flood. There's always a flood to come, and so we have this tension, because God said His promise He would never flood the whole earth, but then we see there is a flood to come, and then the end time, or then in the end times there will be a flood. And some people say is that a literal? And they say, well, that's in tension, or that's contradicting, or it's not correct, because it contradicts God, because He said He never flood the earth. And you say, well, is it God really flooding the earth, or is it because it's Satan and it's not God, so that the promise of the rainbow has not been broken? Hopefully, I didn't have time to put reference or write down references on that, but in my readings, I would come up, it says flood here in Daniel, I believe. Daniel or Zechariah, it talks about there's a flood, and regarding the end times.
I don't believe that this is talking literally. It's talking allegorically, because it's saying the mouth of the serpent poured water like a river after the woman to sweep her away with the flood. You could be overcome in your life by something. Something's flooding in on you. So I think it's about allegorically. Satan is pursuing this woman so fiercely that it feels like she's being overcome by the flood. So I don't think, in my mind, I don't think it's a literal flood.
We could consider like the Holocaust. They were almost wiped out as if by a flood.
Yeah.
Or this persecution that's to come.
That persecution is to come. It's going to be so fierce that it's going to be like a flood. It's flooding over you. You're being trampled by, you're being swallowed up.
And we'll look into that. Like I said, there's Old Testament references that talk about a flood. But you could say, is this a physical, literal flood that happens? Just like when people say, was the flood of Noah, was that a universal flood, or was that a local flood? Those kind of things. You can get into that. Even if it's literal or not, or if it was literal, universal or specific. For now, we'll just say the theory right now is a local, physical flood that takes place that is not from God, it's from Satan, so it's an attack. And that's a good point. It's not saying that God sent the flood, it's saying that came out of the serpent's mouth.
No. Satan is, because Satan has been, he's been thrown down to the earth, and with great wrath, because he knows his time is short. And then it goes right into the dragon fights against the earth. So it's going to be fierce fighting against the people of the earth, and using the earth against him too.
Yeah, and we see that the earth is being judged not just by the plagues from the seals, the trumpets, and the bulls that we haven't read about. Things like 1/3 of this, that, and the other. Stars are falling. light. The moon doesn't give its light. Sun doesn't give its light. Famine, blood. And some people say, is that literal blood, or is that is that literal blood, or is that metaphorical, or is that a? My belief is that it is, and you can watch movie or videos on this about, they call it bleeding earth, where there's so much iron built up in the inside in the earth that when it bursts forth, it's red like blood, and it comes out. I think it's in the glacier or in the or up in, I think, the North Pole, or around there where the polar ice caps are, where it's just shooting out. It's coming forth from the icebergs, and it's just red. It's bright red because it's rich iron oxide coming out of there, and it's just spewing into the sea. And it's just like blood is iron. This iron is red and coming forth, and nothing can live in it. And there's like such a rich buildup in there. That's one of those things. Oh, is it actual blood, or is it just red like blood? Well, my understanding is it's red like blood. Now, there's other times where it says like, well, we'll get into that reading where it actually talks about the literal blood of stuff and like the volume and things like that. Some people might think that's hyperbole, or it's hyperbole, or it's actual. But we'll get into that. So yeah, we get into this red dragon. Right now, red dragon Satan, I tried to draw one up real quick. So we have 7 heads. Each head has a crown or a diadem, some sort of sign of authority. But then 7 heads, 7 crowns for each head, but then 10 horns. So understanding is heads are persons, some sort of figurehead. A figurehead. Crown is some sort of authority, like a king over them. So one king per head. But the 10 horns, we see some, or we'll see that, and then we'll see the description of these other beasts, because we gotta keep these all kind of conjured up. So we have red dragon Satan. And we understand him to be that which gets kicked out of heaven. So we have this recollection of, or we have this telling of a story of the Christ. Well, and we see the Christ child is born, is taken up. So that's already Christ's ascent. So he ascends to the Father. And then we see Michael throwing down Satan from heaven. Now, people say, oh, that's, if you're still thinking that this is creation, you say, oh, that's when Satan got kicked out of heaven. Well, way back when, where I believe when it's, well, even Christ, or in Christ in the Gospels, he goes, I saw Satan fall like a bolt of lightning. I saw him fall. So, oh, that's this fall. Or when they're talking, the prophet Isaiah is talking to the king of Tyre, writing to King of Tyre, and says, oh, behold, star of the morning, how you were so puffed up and you wanted to ascend to the throne, but you've been cast down. This is a separate account. So it sounds like something that's happened in the past, but this is something current in the sense of when John's witnessing, he's writing something current and reporting on it. It sounds like something in the past, but it's something that is future. This casting down, also if we read in like the first chapter of Job, when it talks about the sons of God assemble, it says Satan appears before God, and he goes, "What are you doing here?" And he goes, I've been going to and fro on the earth." And then God said, "Have you considered my servant Job?" So we have, and I erased the tabernacle, but we said that there is a demarcation of sorts of where those that can come before God and those that can't come. And for some reason, in the writing of Job, it says that Satan is able to approach him and actually have a dialogue with, actually talk with him. And God's like, "Hey, have you considered my servant down? My servant Job?" But then we hear in this part that he's fighting with Michael and he gets kicked out. He gets thrown down to the earth in for a second time, but in a different sense, that he's no longer welcome. He's no longer welcome in heaven, and it says his time is short. The dragon saw that he was thrown down to earth. He persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. And it says the 2 wings of the eagle were given to the woman so she could fly away into the wilderness where she was nourished for times, and time and a half from the presence of the serpent. And then we get into that thing where so if we're talking about midweek or mid-trib kind of a thing, and all this is, there's a lot of different things are happening. There's a fleeing or an exile to the wilderness of the 140 and we believe this to be the 144,000 that get sent out. Last week we talked about this when the witnesses were when the witnesses were presented. They were John measures the tabernacle, and he says, leave out the outside part, leave out the court of the Gentiles, because it's been given over to the Gentiles for 42 months. So this is talking about beforehand. The witnesses the 144 get sealed, and there are some that are inside. Those that are inside worshiping inside the temple are saved. Those that are safe. Those that are outside, there is a problem. It's been given over to be trampled by the Gentiles. So something that happens midweek, is there is some sort of attack on Jerusalem. So we established that we have apostasy comes first, the Antichrist is revealed, and then the rapture takes place. Regardless, sometime before midpoint. But we know, according to 2 Thessalonians, these things have to take place in order. It's not like rapture takes place and then the Antichrist reveals himself and then apostasy. It's that order of operations of a falling away, the Antichrist is revealed. He may not have power or authority, but he is revealed as someone that brings about peace. When a treaty is established, once the treaty is established, we understand that the 2 witnesses ministry starts. They appear, and there's an ingathering of Jews, because before then, the temple gets established, the daily sacrifices start, and then we have a treaty. Now, that could take place before or after one another. If there's an ingathering of Jews, it's because something big happens, whether this Antichrist figure actually gets the land of Jerusalem, somehow that takes place, or he makes peace somehow with the people of Palestine and the Muslims and stuff like. Somehow he works out a peace deal, like we've talked about earlier about the Abrahamic Accords that happened a couple of years ago. But somehow there's peace established, because as soon as that's kind of the symbol of the sign of things coming. But peace is established, then a lot of bad stuff happens. But we understand that as like kind of geological stuff happening, famines and wars and rumors of wars and things like that are happening. But we believe there's an ingathering of Jews to Jerusalem. The 2 witnesses start their ministry. There's famine. The witnesses have the power to call down or turn water into blood, and to call down fire. And what was the other thing that the plagues. They could enact any plague that they choose at their will. This is going on, and there's an ingathering of Jews, and it's only for some reason those that are inside the temple are safe. We can believe those are the 144,000. And when that happens, 3.5 years into that, we have peace taken. The treaty broke, so that's when the daily sacrifices are taken away. We're going to get into the beasts making their presentation. So right now we have one beast. So we have the red dragon, Satan, who gets thrown down. And then chapter 13, the majority of it, all of it, is 2 more beasts that come out of that. But we understand that midpoint, Jerusalem will be attacked. Jews will flee or be exiled, because it goes half will flee, half will be exiled. We believe those that are fleeing of the 144,000 into the wilderness, their ministry is to survive. Theirs is to survive. We believe that, that's what it's saying when it says the woman was given the wings of the eagle to go out into the wilderness and be nourished for
1,260 days.
yeah,
3.5 years.
3.5 years. We understand that 42 months, 12,000 or 1,260 days, 3.5 years. So her thing is she goes out in the wilderness to survive. That's where I believe that the flood will happen while she's fleeing. A flood will get sent forth, and the ground will open up, drink up the water, but she'll be out in the wilderness and be safe. The abomination of desolation, that'll take place, and well, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll read 13 and talk a little bit more.
The dragon took its stand on the sand of Caesar. Okay, that's the other one. Okay, 13, right?
Yep,
Or 14? 13?
13.
Okay, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on its horns were 10 diadems, and on its head was blasphemous names. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And the dragon gave it his power and his throne and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have received a death blow, but its mortal wound had been healed. In amazement, the whole earth followed the beast, then worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like this beast, and who can fight against it?" The beast was given a mouth to utter haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opens its mouth and utters blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. And it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. It was given authority over every tribe and people, language, and nation, and all the inhabitants of the earth will worship it. Every one whose name has not been written from the foundations of the world in the book of life of the Lamb that was slaughtered. Let everyone who has an ear listen. If you are to be taken captive into captivity, you go. If you kill with the sword you must be killed. Here is a call for the endurance and the faith of the saints. Then I saw another beast that rose out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercised all authority of the first beast on its behalf, and it made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound had been healed. It performed great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in the sight of all. And by the sign that it is allowed to perform on behalf of the beast, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that had been wounded by the sword and yet alive. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast could even speak and cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Also, it caused all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand and on the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell who does not have the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let everyone with understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a person. Its number is 666.
This is where we get the establishment of these beast powers. And when it says a beast, it's some sort of, we understand that to be some sort of governmental authority, some sort of confederation of powers. Now, double check me on this. So the red dragon had 7 heads, 10 horns, 7 crowns. The sea beast, I put the beast of the abyss. The water-related beast, the aquatic, the Leviathan. 7 heads, 10 horns, 10 crowns. Is that correct?
10 horns, 7 heads, and on it horns were 7 diadems, and the head was blasphemous name.
That's the...
Crowns, diadems, yeah.
So it's only...
But it's 7. 10, no, you're right, 10
Yeah, okay.
diadems. 10 horns, 10 diadems, 7
Okay.
heads.
So, just, yeah, I want to make that sure because for some reason I'm reading different things, especially when we get into Daniel about stuff. Heads, horns, crowns. Changes up. Okay, check me on this. The land, earth beast. So, it has 2 horns.
Like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon.
Okay, so we're assuming it has 1 head. 1 head, 2 horns. 1 head, 1 person. 2 horns, 2 plots, or 2 things of authority, 2 signs of authority. So we understand the heads to be like persons, the horns to be some sort of land or property, and crowns to be kingdoms. Person or persons. So we have this introduction of 3 different beasts. We understand this land. We got to get the nomenclature right, the naming, because we can get really confused. Reading through it the first time around on Revelation, I was like, there's like 6 different beasts. Because there's the beast of the abyss, the angel or the king of the abyss, and then there's red dragon, there's sea beast, there's land beast, and then we get even more confusing when you get further on, and we won't get to this, but Revelation 17, where it talks about this woman that's riding a beast. So there's a 5th beast, but if you pay attention to the different descriptions, you'll understand that there's differences. There might be differences, but that's because a change has happened. They're not 2 separate things, but there's a change that happens, especially here. So if we understand crowns to be kingdoms, then we have 3 kingdoms that got added to this sea beast. The land beast we can understand as the Antichrist.
The land beast, yes.
Yeah.
It's the Antichrist or the religious, whatever.
The religious figurehead.
Figurehead.
Because we have, and we're going to use terms that we use to describe the Trinity for this anti-Trinity. So
that second beast is the government of the Antichrist. This is the religion of the Antichrist, the second beast, the third beast. The second beast is the government of the Antichrist.
And we talked about this earlier, that every time Satan is addressed, he's not addressed directly. Well, in Job, he's addressed directly, but any other time he's addressed by what's representing him. The only reason we refer to Satan as that the serpent of old, the one in the garden, is only because John refers to him. Because we just know that there was a snake that was cunning in the garden. Nobody said that was Satan until John made this connection in Revelation. That was the serpent of old. When God's speaking of the serpent, he's cursing the serpent. We understand that God's speaking to Satan through whatever he embodied, if that makes sense. So if we want to think about administration of stuff, we talked about God. God has his administration of grace, his the living creatures, his angels, his people, his bride, that kind of stuff.
Satan has his beast.
We have his beast, but we can consider the red dragon Satan as anti-God the Father, the sea abyss beast as anti-Holy Spirit or government. Think about the woke culture, or this, we all need to support the current thing. That government propaganda and what they're trying to force on us, especially with like LGBTQ rights and things like that. And this earth beast as Antichrist, so Antichrist or God the Son. So we have a trinity, we have an anti-trinity to mimic or to be a counterfeit of God's trinity.
Because Satan always counterfeits God.
Satan is not original, he just counterfeits.
Yeah.
Even when he wanted, or even he's not original, I just want my throne to be like his. I don't want to be more, I'll just ascend and be like him.
No, take it. Yeah.
The one thing is, I forget, is it the Mormons that think Satan is Christ's brother?
No,
I think it's the Mormons that believe that. But
no wonder they're lost.
Satan is an angel. He is less than Christ.
He was a great angel until he fell.
He was a great angel, but even the great angel can't compare to Christ.
That's right.
Apollos talks about that in Hebrews, that Christ is better than the angels. He was made a little bit less than the angels, but he's above them when he took on flesh. And they say he's better than the angels because Jews believe that angels are higher beings than humans. Yes, they are, but Christ is even higher than the angel. And that he's our better high priest. He's better promises on a better sacrifice, on a better covenant. So we can understand that, just to keep that in mind, that so this God the Father, or anti-God the Father, Satan, the red dragon, gets kicked out of heaven. He establishes a government real quick. The people are primed to accept somebody. That his spirit is let loose, and we have this. If you think of sea, think abyss, think anything aquatic, and I have a theory to go back on of. This is not the first time we've seen this beast before. And then the lamb beast, the Antichrist, he looked like a lamb, spoke like a dragon, and had 2 horns. Now, you could just play that off as, it's a lamb, it has 2 horns. That's just natural anatomy. But if we go off all this stuff, it specifically said it had 2 horns. Like, it wasn't like it was something different. It's explicitly stated. So some think that these 2 horns could be, if there's all this problems or the reason why this Antichrist has power, is able to make peace, is because he was able to have the Palestine and the Israel at the time be able to make peace with the land of Israel. God has always promised. The only thing, or one of the big promises of God, is that He promised the land of Canaan, will go to Israel, and everybody but the Jews like that, because the Jews said, "This is our land. God promised it," and that's why you have all these wars. Even when in 1948, when Israel became a nation, we became a nation in one day, and that was a prophecy fulfilled. Immediately, war, just warring over stuff. What was it? Was it the Jordan Straits, or what was it that they were fighting over for the longest time? It's just constant war, to the point where Israel is battle hardened. Like the military and protection is built into their society, and so there has to be some sort of peace. Where the original temple was built, the Eye of the Rock is, so there's Muslim influence there. and they say, no, this is where Muhammad spoke, and Jews are like, no, that's where our temple was. There's always been a contest for that land. Could it be that these two horns is somebody that's able to make the peace between Muslims and Jews and make a compromise? Some people believe that the two horns is Israel and Judah. They're able to make some sort of, rather Israel become a nation, but actually making Israel separate, like northern kingdom, southern kingdom. And he has control over both of them, and he's able to make peace between them. Because one of the things in, I think, Zechariah 13, it talks about that God takes two sticks, and one's supposed to represent Judah, one's supposed to represent Israel. And it says that eventually he's going to put them together. He's going to bind them together. But he said when Assyria came and took Israel, he broke his covenant with Israel. And then when Judah, when they rejected the Messiah, he broke his covenant with Judah. But he said there's going to become a time where I'm going to join them together. So this could be Antichrist trying to mimic prophecy and saying, look, I'm building them together. I've made them two, and now I'm going to make them one. He's able to establish peace, and that might be what this treaty is all about. So there's peace and there's a treaty. We don't know what this treaty is, but it has to do with a temple and sacrifices being able to happen. You can't have a temple if there's still a contest over who owns the land. So somehow that is how peace. It's peace for a brief moment to get all this happening, and then all that like ecological and geological stuff seem to happen. And then midpoint, we have problems happening. Covenant's broken. Jerusalem is attacked. The Jews are fleeing. Some are exiled. So some are taken as slaves and sent out like they were in Babylon and in Assyria. And the temple gets desecrated. We have the abomination of desolation, which I believe is this image that... Did we read that?
Not yet.
Yeah, he makes an image for people to worship.
Oh, the mark of the beast.
Well, it says, let's see, verse 14, he deceived those who dwell on the earth because of the signs which he has given to perform the presence, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image. So he tells people to make an image, of the beast. So make an image of...
Wounded by the sword and yet alive. So it's mimicking, he was wounded and is alive like he was dead and was raised again like Christ.
Yeah, and there's plenty of cults that believe are still waiting for something like that.
And up here, he performed great signs and made fire come down from heaven to the earth in the sight of all, and by the signs that it was allowed to perform on behalf of the beast. So it's making it look like Christ when he walked the earth, he had signs and wonders and healed people, and so he's mimicking. He's the Antichrist. He's mimicking.
3.5 year ministry of Christ, 3.5 ministry of the witnesses, and we have 3.5 year ministry of Satan acting as a Christ.
Yeah.
And deceiving many. To make an image of the sea beast, because the sea beast is the one that has 10 heads, 10 crowns, 7 heads, 10 horns, 10 crowns. One of those heads gets wounded, mortally wounded, and then this Antichrist heals it, and everybody's like in awe of that, and he goes, make an image of it. So people make an image of it, and then he makes an image of it to speak.
The image allowed to give breath to the... It was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast could even speak and cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be killed.
Yeah, and that sounds like Daniel when they said So we'll go over the statue, but Daniel interprets the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, I believe, of the statue. And so what does Nebuchadnezzar do? He builds rather than building a statue like he saw in his dream of gold, silver, bronze, Nebuchadnezzar builds a pure gold statue, and then he says, Daniel, you interpret this dream, I want you to bow down and worship this. I think that's in chapter 2 or 3 of it. In the same way, those that don't bow down to it are killed. And
then you have to.
And then there's a mark given to those people. They can't buy, sell, or trade because they need a mark, and it's on the right hand or on the forehead. In the same way, the Jews, they would wrap God's word around their arm and put the box that had the scripture in it on their forehead. That the word needs to be forever, always present in your mind and on your arm, like it needs to be familiar and close. We have this, you can't even buy, sell, or trade, you can't even commence commerce. And if you don't worship this image that he made people, to see people to actually make images, he made an image that could speak. It's my belief that this image that he makes to speak, to cause people to see, he puts that in the temple that he established. The peace treaty and everything with the Jews and all that. The abomination of desolation is this image that's put in the temple, and he takes away, he removes the sacrifices and makes himself God. He goes, look, this thing's talking, I'm putting it in the temple. He puts himself in the temple and says, I'm God. And that is midpoint. Now, okay, we understand that all this is happening. How does he come about? Well, we see that John talks about all this established stuff, but have we seen this sea beast before? If we're reading chronologically through it, it seems like it seems like we're rereading stuff, or this seems familiar. The chapter before it, the two witnesses, they are killed. It says, when they had finished their testimony, this is verse 7 of chapter 11, when they finished their testimony, the witnesses, the beast that came out of the abyss, so we have sea and we have abyss. The beast that came out of the abyss, at some points I thought these were two different ones. This is one and the same. He came up, made war with them, overcame them, killed them, and their bodies were laid down the street. And there was for 3.5 days, they laid them out in the street. There was a big celebration, and then they were bodily resurrected, and then they were spiritually raptured in the presence of all. So it's even calling even further back to chapter 9. It says, they had as king over them the angel of the abyss. The name in Hebrew is abandoned. In the Greek, he had the name Apollyon, so destroyer or destruction. So it says, a king over them, angel of the abyss. It is believed that is the beast power. So this beast power that came out of the sea, came out of the abyss, came out of the bottomless pit. This is a theory. This might be a stretch. But could it be, we're talking about dual prophecy. I have it written on the second page at the end, but kind of an idea. If we believe that chronologically, John he writes about something and then it stops. It doesn't conclude, it just kind of stops and it goes back. It seems like it goes to a certain, it seems like it's building up, then it stops. And then it goes back, and it might go back to the beginning or might go back halfway, but there's kind of a layering effect of stuff, a layering effect of sorts. Now, could it be that this red dragon that was cast down, could that be the great star Wormwood that was thrown out of heaven? Because it says a great star.
And a star is an angel.
And an angel is a star. And it says that there was a great star because, and this is just anecdotal and logic on it, or just reasoning, but if an asteroid or a comet or something hit the Earth, I mean, even something small, but this says it's a great star. If something great hits the Earth, Earth's devastated. Could it be that this great star, so chapter 8, verse 10, the third angel sounded, this is the trumpet, third trumpet sounds, a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on a third of the river and on the springs. The name of the star is called Wormwood, which is bitter, which means bitter, and a third of the water became wormwood, and the men died from the water because they had been made bitter. After that, the fourth angel sounded. A third of the sun, moon, and stars were struck. Now, we believe that when Satan fell, 1/3 of the angels fell with him. 1/3 of the stars fell. That one's a little weak because I believe it's the light of the physical light of the heavenly lights gets dim or gets completely blacked out. But after that, John hears an angel flying in mid-heaven saying, "Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth for the remaining blasts of the three angels to be sound." And after that, it says, "I saw a star fall from heaven, which had fallen to the earth, and the keys of the bottomless pit was given to him. He opened the bottomless pit, and all this demonic stuff, all these locust-like things come out." This is where we understand that the red dragon Satan was thrown out with the keys, unlocks the abyss. What comes out of the abyss is the king, the angel that was given authority, that is known as the destroyer or destruction, Abaddon or Apollyon. They had as king over them the angel of the abyss. And then that angel of the abyss, we understand it to be the anti-spirit or the government. It kills the two witnesses. And then John talks about Satan being thrown out, another description. So like an explanation of what he already told. And then he gives a description of these three entities. Like he dedicates 2 chapters to a description of it. In a sense, he gives an abstract or he gives a summary of something, and then he gives more detailed description later on. So that's why it seems like it leads up and like, okay, we read about that, we move along here, and then it kind of resets, or it kind of gives more detail or fleshes out what's going on here. And it's going to get more crazy when we get into chapter 14. But my understanding is that he's already been talking about the elements are there. It's as if he's describing it from a certain perspective, and then he's given a commentary on it later on. So he says, he talks about these two. I mean, all the stuff that happens. We have the bottomless pit. The angel bottomless pit, which is the first woe, which it would seem the woes, it's not cut and dry like we could say, 3.5 years, that's we have 3.5 years, split up half and half of the 7, and we have 3 different sets of 7. We have seals, trumpets, bowls. It would seem like the seals happen early, or if they do happen, there's maybe an overlapping of stuff, or they happen as a setup, because we understand the seals to be more so of surveying the land, surveying and things happening, wars and rumors of wars, earthquakes and things like that. Nothing too big. Trumpets is the calling of people, the calling to war, worship, or a wedding, the gathering of stuff, and the woes are direct judgment. The bowls are. Then we have these 3 woes, and the 3 woes are the sea beast, the government. We have both a demonic government and demonic entities that torture man for 5 months. We have this king of the east that is kind of shrouded in mystery. And then we have the 2 witnesses that have been ministering. They get killed by the demonic government. And not only that, this Antichrist figure gets even more power. So he might have been revealed earlier on before the tribulation, like, he's just a figurehead, or, he's a philanthropist or something, or he's some up-and-coming leader with no power of his own. But now he's deceiving people, telling people to get the mark, making images come to life, declaring himself to be God, all within a span of at least 3.5 years. He's went from kind of a nobody up-and-comer, an underdog of sorts, to this person that's deceiving, to Antichrist the Son.
Should we read Daniel on our own?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, read Daniel and bring questions. Yeah, I have...
Whole book of Daniel?
No, chapters 2, 7, 8, 11,
Right here.
and Joel chapter 2 and 3, I believe. And that should get us up to, we can go, or we'll be able to go over most of that stuff next week. We're getting close. I think wind's starting up in a couple weeks, so we should be able to finish everything out with a little bit of time to spare. Well, or at least the planning meeting's in a couple weeks, so we have a little bit of breathing room.
12th, I think, is the first night
Yeah, and
of September.
we'll see. So, yeah, we only got through 13, which that's fine. But yeah, read Daniel, and we're going to see that it talks about these. It talks that the beasts and Daniel are talking about separate governments,
And
the,
they get weaker as they go down.
yeah. So we
The
have
gold, they're strong.
gold, silver, bronze, iron, and iron clay.
They're not very strong.
That is separate. It's not. It's made. It's not adhered together, but it's a separate. It's separate. It does not cohere. And then we have the feet of that, and we'll get into more details of that later. But also, we have the statue, and it says gold, silver, bronze, iron, and then that is Daniel 2. Daniel 7 talks about a lion, a bear, a leopard, and then a dreadful creature that represents kind of, it's talking about the same thing in different terms. One's a statue of different precious metals. The other is an animal of different animals with different attributes of it. Daniel 8 talks about a ram and a goat. Really, the book of Daniel is a lot of it, other than Daniel in the lion's den and the fiery furnace, that are talking about stuff that happened specifically there. It's all prophetic, talking about stuff to come.
And it was in Daniel is where it says, seal it up.
Yeah, seal us up for later.
So
This
till
is,
the end. And now John is telling you.
and Daniel, it goes through, and this is all written before it even happens. We read it looking back and like, oh yeah, through history you know that happens.
Yeah,
but
but
Daniel was writing in the
yeah.
sense of he was
This is to come.
the first exile. He was one of the first exiles because they exiled the royal family first, and he was part of the royalty. Him and the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I forget, one of them's Azariah,
Azariah.
they get exiled first to Babylon, and they witness the change from Babylon to Persia, and I think it goes Nebuchadnezzar, Belteshazzar, Darius, and he witnesses a big power change from Babylon to the Meso-Persia, or Mesopotamia Persia. I think I put Medo-Persia, which I meant Meso-Persia. Mesopotamia Persia kind of alliance. And then God says, oh, by the way, it's going to be, and I think in my Bible it even has the heading, they say, this is Greece. So when it's like, the bronze belly, that's Greece. Iron is, that's Rome, because we're writing in the sense of looking back in history. And then we have iron, if iron is supposed to be Rome, we have Rome blended with clay, and the Rock of Ages hits it and shatters the whole thing. But then we see that, bear, or lion, bear, leopard, dreadful creature, and they use the same thing. The description in chapter 13 of something that looks like it looked like a leopard. It had feet like those of a bear and a mouth like a lion. And the dragon was given him power and his throne. Talking about the sea beast, it's saying this government is going to look like, it's going to have similarities of Babylon, of Mesopotamia, Persia, and of Greece, kind of an amalgamation of that stuff. And so it's going to look like this, but it's going to be different than all the others. It's going to be the dreadful beast that has different attributes of it. So we'll get into that. So read those. Whatever I have noted, Daniel 2, 7, and 8. 11 is a dual prophecy. And if you have time, look up Antiochus Epiphanes, because a lot of people, he is an antichrist figure. Like, he is an antichrist in the form of him. In his time, he destroyed, or he desecrated the temple. He changed times and religions and things like that. I think he killed 70,000 Jews in one day, or after he sacked Jerusalem, and he sacrificed a pig in the altar, boiled the flesh, and I think they said he sprinkled the broth everywhere of the pig sacrifice, all over and on the books and everything. He desecrated the whole temple. And that's when the Maccabean revolution happened. I put 176 BC. It took 3 years for them to fight off the Romans, and then that's when they established the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah, or the festival of dedication, is because they rededicated the temple. They didn't have enough oil. They didn't have enough oil to keep it lit for one day, and it kept lit for 8 days. So it was one of those miracles of God God multiplied the oil even when we had too few. So they were able to rededicate the temple with 1 day's worth, or less than a day's worth of oil, and it lasted 8 days until they got more oil in, because it said he desecrated everything, even the oil to light the menorah. They found a little bit. They found a remnant, and God was able to use that. So that's where the Hanukkah dedication comes from. But even that, it talks about an abomination of desolation. And a lot of people say, oh, the preterist, those that believe that everything has been fulfilled and we're kind of in the time after, they believe that Antiochus Epiphanes was this Antichrist, and he set up the abomination of desolation. But the temple was dedicated in 3 years on the dot, not 3.5 years, or whatever Daniel put, 2,300 days or something is what Daniel puts in. Blessed is the one who reaches the 200 or 2,300th day or something. So, like I said, similarities, but there's differences. So we'll go over that later. So.